Hello and welcome to the Lab, a Minecraft podcast where we explore, experiment, and theorize about all things Minecraft. I am joined with my co-host, my brother from down under, the Troj. And also today we have a special guest, Jake Kelton. You might know him from Jake Kelton Crafts, the man that got Mumbo obsessed with fans. Yeah, he's a big fan of Jake's fans from the original fan. Now I'm confused.
Welcome to the podcast, Jake. Thank you for joining us for this, what should be a very, very interesting chat.
It's an honor, pleasure to be here, and thank you for reaching out and asking me to join you all.
Our absolute pleasure.
Yeah, so Buildstone. Let's just get right into it. Buildstone, this thing that's you've kind of got everybody looking deeper into. This thing called Buildstone. We have different types of redstone. We have slimestone, leafstone. Now there's too many to name, but this is kind of a new redstone meta, Buildstone. So why don't you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, on top of what you're saying about leafstone and slimestone and all types of different redstone farms, I recently came across a new one that somebody is coining audio stone, which is exciting. But yeah, this came about with the idea of animating things in Minecraft. And it's fun. The terminology, we actually decided on the name in the Discord, myself and a bunch of people that kind of got started on trying to figure out what we can do with animating things within the Minecraft space. And we tossed out a whole bunch of different names, and this was the one that we kind of collectively all agreed upon was the nicest sounding, but it just so happened to also pair with Grian and Mumbo from Hermitcraft, which even more so kind of confirmed this idea of combining the art of building aesthetically in Minecraft, which there's builders who do beautiful stuff and make amazing, beautiful creations, and then the art of understanding the technical side of redstone, and you combine the builders and the redstone into Buildstone, and that's basically what we're doing, which is most of the time people, when it comes to redstone, builders specifically, view it as a tool for making it easier to gather resources or a tool to simply farm stuff. And whether it's farming experience, whether it's farming resources to then go build pretty things. And in fairness, a lot of people see redstone as you only make just enough of it to get the resource that you need, and then you turn it off and ignore it because it does add lag to the world, and less lag is always better. But what I was kind of experimenting with early on was saying, I don't have that many farms that are in my world. And I also don't mind, even if I do experience a little bit of lag, I will take the suffering of a little lag and having a clock that's constantly running for the aesthetic of having something that moves. And by proving that you can create some very minor, they don't add a lot of lift to your world in terms of running the world, so it's not going to add that much lag. You add a little bit to add a bit of movement can do a lot and put some really big lift into adding life into your world by adding these subtle amounts of movement in different builds.
Yeah, we've talked on this podcast before about like good times with Scar, and the thing that one of his builds that comes immediately to mind for me is his big dig from I think a couple of seasons ago, where he bought in, he set his builds up, which sort of gave the illusion of movement. But if in reality it's sort of like someone's come along with a camera taking a snapshot at one particular moment, because obviously everything's stationary, but it looks like it's in movement. And I think that's one thing that it has drawn in historically people to the Create mod, is because you get to introduce that movement with windmills and, you know, trains, and you can actually make cars out of trains and stuff like that. And you get that movement to that world. It's not a static environment. And I think the thing that really grabbed my attention, Jake, was actually your flags. I haven't watched too much Hermitcraft of late, but mine had been telling me about this whole fan thing, and I watched it briefly and went, wow, that's pretty cool. But what really grabbed my attention was your flags, because that is absolutely stunning. That is amazing.
Yeah, and as you said, the snapshot really is what kind of defined for me when I'm trying to process on what would be impactful to my world. adding life into the world is saying the world can look frozen, especially as a solo player who's playing in my own kind of mini forever world, building different things. But I'm walking through my world to experience it, it can feel like it's frozen in time, as you said. And it's a great way to kind of phrase it. And so I said, hey, since I'm not doing any crazy farms or anything, let's see what can happen. And I have to give credit to the community, in the Buildstone community, especially in the Discord, where most of the designs that are coming out are not one individual person invented everything in regards to the design. So I constantly throw it back to the community and say that I certainly had a hand in a number of these creations, but there's so much, the people that are really knowledgeable about Redstone that are coming in helping to answer questions about how to make these things really small and compact so they fit within certain areas, and this aesthetic side of things that says, hey, we need gradients, we need to pick the right blocks to make these things look really good. And I think the fans not only impressed just because from a distance they still have that wow factor, and there's that element of you don't have to be right up next to it, you don't have to be listening to the pistons moving or whatever. But the fact that all that redstone can be packed into the top of the tower, and so it really feels like that flag is floating and moving on its own. Where some of the fans, especially the really big ones, you have to put them up against a wall or some big factory or something. And so mentally you're going, oh, all the redstone is built into the building behind it. That makes sense. The waterfall, it's like, oh, you got all that rock, you got plenty of space for redstone to be shoved in there. The flags, however, you just see a flag on top of a post floating in the air doing its thing, and you're just like, wow.
Yeah, when in your video of those flags, like when you're I think you're standing or you're walking a fair way away, and you got the bridge sort of on the left and the sun either rising or setting. I can't quite remember. It was just absolutely stunning. You're looking at going, oh, this is obviously a mod or something, but to realize that this is now possible in vanilla Minecraft is actually it's elegant in its simplicity. Like, why has no one thought of this before? Because obviously redstone's always been a thing, as building aesthetically, but not to my knowledge, not too many people have combined it in the way this Buildstone movement actually has. It's like, why didn't someone think of this sooner?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the kind of points that we've already mentioned a little bit. Is on one hand, the sacrificing of having a bunch of redstone stuff that doesn't actually benefit you besides aesthetics doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because builders just build pretty things. And the redstone technical side of things is a whole complicated world. And the redstone complicated says, why would I just build something that flaps around? That doesn't do anything. I want to build something that harvests 1 million resources an hour or whatever and is awesome. But then there's the additional aspect to it, which I've been lovingly referring to in the Discord, this idea of, hey, mom, can we have the create mod? No, we have the create mod at home. And then what we're Buildstone is just the create mod at home. Because it's the create mod, but less, because we do have the limitations of vanilla Minecraft. But I think that's also what makes it more impressive, is that when people say, hey, I want to add movement, I want to add spinning windmills, I want to add flowing waterfalls, I want to add fluttering flags, it's just like, well, go play create then. That's what create's for. Go do that in create. And instead, what we've said is, yeah, the mod of create is great and it's awesome, it's fantastic, and for those people who love it, that's awesome, but we love Minecraft, and we're going to push the limits of what survival Minecraft can do. And that's another thing that specifically for the Discord that we have really kind of stressed. Most people that are building these designs are building them to be in survival friendly. So you don't have to have fancy data packs. You don't have to have fancy mods. You don't have to have fancy, you could just open up any Minecraft world and build this stuff. And there's even a large push as well to say, hey, if you build it in Java, how can we build it in Bedrock as well? Because what we've also recognized is there's a huge community of Bedrock people that have kind of set to the side because Java is where you do redstone. And we're saying, hey, but for our designs, because we can, let's try. Let's at least put some effort into seeing what we can do to make these things in Bedrock as well, and bring the community even more so together in that way.
That's one thing I really like about I'm in your Discord there, the Buildstone one. And I can very, very clearly see what you're saying there is someone has an idea or brings an initial concept to the Discord, and then everyone, it's like a collaborative effort to put it out, which I think is just absolutely, it's brilliant. I'm actually really enjoying, I haven't said too much on there, but I'm enjoying looking at it, and it's actually inspiring to go, you know, at the moment, as an example, I'm working on a massive Greek/fantasy build on the Interim server, and had just finished building this like a little fishing village, and I'm sitting there thinking, snapshot in time, you know, it's that static world. I could have birds, I could have a fishing boat moving back and forth, you know, it's like, it's sort of taking the blinkers off, so to speak. It is inspiring, and then it's like, okay, well, what else is possible here? You know, can we have a moving crane? Or, you know, it's just like, what is the limits of this thing? But I want to touch very, very quickly on the lag thing. How laggy do you find it? You know, does it have much of an input on your system?
So right now in my solo world, I have not had really any experience with lag. Now, whether that's because I have a pretty decent computer, which I don't know how my computer ranks against other computers. I'm not that much of a tech head. But I know that I have a fairly decent computer and my system is not lagging really ever. I think the only time I ever had lag was one time when I went to start the zero tick waterfall, which is basically 3 different waterfall piston feed tapes that are all zero tick. And so it's a lot of moving pieces very, very quickly. And when I went to turn it on, the computer took a moment to basically just register how many different things were moving. And then once it, you know, figured it out, then it flowed fine and everything was good afterwards. So it was a one moment of lag in that. But since that build was put together, there's actually been several more designs for redstone waterfalls, buildstone waterfalls that are much more lag friendly than even that. And then what I want to touch on here that you all don't even know yet, and it's going to be being showcased a little bit more in some future videos, is there's a whole new genre of buildstone that's being cooked up in the Discord that doesn't even use redstone. It actually utilizes other tricks and combinations. So one I'll give an explanation for is that if you take something like an armor stand and you throw it, you kind of mash it with pistons or dispensers into a magma block, and then you put water over the magma block will sense the armor stand, which is an entity, which means that it's interacting with the water. But because the magma is pulling things down, the armor stand stays in place, like in the middle of the magma block, and the water above it has this amazing splashing particle effect because it thinks that there's an entity that's inside of the water / the magma block, but there really isn't an entity because it's hidden within the magma block itself, but you still get that splash effect. That uses no redstone at all. It's a single armor stand combined with the magma block. And so it's stuff like that that we can make these things even more like lag friendly in that regard. But I think that you'd have to make a lot of these things and having a ton of them running consistently for you to start experiencing a lot of lag. And so I think of like Hermitcraft, where you would need a ton of clocks with a ton of armor stands. The other thing I will throw in as well is that most of these that I've seen and that I've been helping to build don't have individual items. And that's what a lot of the redstone farms lag comes from, besides obviously, you know, blocks being updated and redstone in general, is you're handling, you know, tens of thousands of items flowing through your different systems. None of this stuff deals with items. And so you take out a huge factor in lag and computational resources because you don't have these items that you're going to have to filter and process through and sort and store and all that sort of stuff.
I've got to admit, that was one of the first things that hit my mind, because I'm the one that sort of runs the server side of Interrealms behind the scenes. And it's like, if this starts cottoning onto our server, which it probably will, because once one of us starts doing something, someone will see it, and then the idea spreads, and you know, this is a trend that's waiting to explode. I think it's like, what impact is this going to have on our server? Like, our server's probably not as beefy and as well optimized, I guess, as probably Hermitcraft is. And as it is, Hermitcraft, usually when you download their world, is pretty much a lag fest as it is anyway. Yeah, that was one of my main thoughts is, you know, if we have 4 or 5 people all getting into Buildstone, all these things are running at the same time. That's going to be an interesting experience. But it was a good point that you raised there. It's not item creating focused. But I think too, most of your things have an on-off switch, which I think is probably key for like server management. Is if you're not using it, have it turned off.
Yeah, I like to build in an on-off switch for a couple of different reasons. One is so that, that way, when it comes to lag, if I need to, I can turn it off. But again, I haven't really experienced it much, and I don't mind it being on. But also because we're doing a lot of sharing and people are asking for schematics and those sorts of things, it's better to share machines when they're off and then say, hey, push the button to turn it on, and then you can leave it, running afterwards and everything. And so I think that having perpetual motion machines but that have a built-in on-off switch is just it's a handy thing, and it's something that we are typically trying to do. Now, you can't do that in some cases when it comes to what I have also referred to jokingly as arrow tech, which is where you're using animated arrows and other blocks like that with different particle effects. Those are a little bit more perpetual in their own right, but that's another factor, is that I do have, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 of those around my main castle at this point, doing different things and animating certain things, and those haven't been any issue. So I don't know what the limit is, if you could have 100, 200, 500 in an area before it starts to be problematic, but I have not hit that limit yet, if that is the case.
Do many of the contraptions, sorry, now I'm calling them contraptions because that's my create mod experience coming through, I apologize, but do many of the inventions, shall we say, do many have the ability to, if you log off, or they cross chunks or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it heavily depends on the build. It heavily depends on the particular how you build it and all these sorts of things. So, for example, the zero tick waterfall is one that I would be very hesitant to build it across multiple different chunks. And you could probably log off without too much issue, but I would be hesitant to unload it to disappear off into the distance, just because you have so many different moving pieces. The flag is definitely one that a number of people have noticed, that if you unload it from a certain distance, depending on what your settings are, it can tend to falling concrete and falling entities like concrete powder have a lot of issues landing on other things that are moving, whether it's other concrete powder or whether it's pistons or something. And so that's also one that I would recommend you either build a chunk loader underneath it, or you turn it off before you log off. But I think that part of the reason why I showcase what I do is because it is inspiring other people to say, hey, this is the step one design, right? Think about the earliest days of redstone farms, when people were just starting to figure out how to push things into TNT dupers and try to farm resources through that. Those things have come so far in the last several years, in terms of efficiency and in terms of keeping them from breaking and all this sort of stuff. And so we are only on the beginning steps of like, this flag is really, really beautiful, but it's kind of in a sort of a prototype. And so how do we push this design further to say, what are ways that we can make it break less? What are ways that we can make it log off safe? If it's on a server, you don't have to worry about logging off because the server is perpetually online. If we chunk load it underneath it, then you just throw an ender pearl into an ender pearl stasis chamber, then it runs fine. These sorts of things can be worked around, and new designs can be invented. And what I'm also kind of hoping is that Mojang will put an ear to the community as they see more and more people that are interested in these sorts of things, and maybe from the coding side of things, help us out a little bit in terms of making things a bit more stable so that we don't have as many issues with logging out. But I will say, for the most part, most of these things are log out friendly. And then depends, it very heavily depends on the contraption is a fine word for it. It heavily depends on the contraption, whether or not it's chunk unloading or loading safe. But most of them are small enough that if you put them into a single chunk, they're not going to be problematic.
Yeah, right. Miner, you're being very quiet.
Hey, I have all kinds of thoughts running through my head. I'm just waiting for
Let's
my
hear
moments.
it. Come on. No,
Go for
Waiting
it.
for my moments. I mean, you guys are having a heated discussion. I was like, I don't want to stop. And thoughts of came and went, and okay. Questions, thoughts. We talked about lag. That was one of my thoughts, but also piston noise. Now, from your community, do you find that people may turn their sounds down on that? And also, if there was something that was more quality of life, or even a mod, on Interones, we use different mods to decrease the sound of those, to where, you didn't have to always look at something like that was animated from afar. That's, especially for like the fans, right up next to it, there's a lot of sound going on. So in the community, do you find that people tend to turn their sounds down for, is it block sounds?
Yeah, so you can turn the block sounds down, and that's definitely something I'm sure some people have done. But I think something that a lot of people miss is that you only have to be 16 blocks away for you to not be able to hear something move. And 16 blocks is not actually that far. You build a 3-story
Yeah.
factory, you put your fans on the 3rd story, you're not going to be able to hear it walking around on the floor, depending on how close you are. And in some cases, like with the zero tick waterfall, I actually covered up most of the piston sounds by using a creeper head on a note block, which is vanilla
Okay.
friendly or survival friendly. And that adds a hissing sound of the creeper head that's kind of, and it sounds more
Yeah.
like a waterfall. And if you're right
Mm.
up next to a waterfall, there's almost this aesthetic audio stone effect of adding more of that ambiance that would make more sense than
Right.
just pistons whooshing. But if you do find that you want your animated stuff to be right up close to you, then you certainly can. I would recommend using a data pack, not even a mod. You can just simply get a simple data pack, vanilla tweaks. Has a whole bunch of different ways to customize your audio experience. In there, you can silence
Oh.
pistons, or you can do just different ways to control block sounds. And so, vanilla tweaks. I don't. I used to use it. I don't actually have it on my current setup, but it's definitely something that I would recommend if you are messing around with that. But the other thing that I personally will say about it is I enjoy the challenge of finding ways to not have to hide the block noise, but make it so you can't hear it anyway. There's a thrill. So I will say that my personality is a problem solver. I love problem solving. I love tinkering and figuring things out. And so the easy way out is just turn block noise off or vanilla tweaks or something. The hard way that I enjoy is I have on my world a machine that is underneath a blacksmith shop. And at the blacksmith shop, as you're standing there, you can actually hear the tink, tink, tink of an anvil, but you don't hear any piston noises. Well, it turns out because by using a whole series of complicated stacking of slime, I can get the pistons that are dropping and then pushing back up the anvils at the right time to get the anvil noise, but it's just far enough underneath the ground away from you that when you're standing in the shop, you don't actually hear the piston noise. And so there's ways that you can kind of twist things within the game. Also, the flag is another one that if you're standing at the top of a tower, the pistons pushing and pulling the blocks, you can't actually hear them because they're more than 16 blocks above you. And so you can do these sorts of things to kind of not have to mess around with your audio as much.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's, rather than turning down your sounds, if there's some kind of data pack or something to where you could like have a slider, to have it like maybe 1 block away, or 2 blocks away, you start to not hear it.
I
But I
haven't
mean,
seen that, but I'm sure somebody out there has made one, or if not, it's probably getting built right now
yeah,
because I can see a lot of people in the community asking for something like that. That'd be really cool.
yeah. One of your latest videos, messing around with leads. I really enjoyed the wandering trader hack with the minecart and the villager. So I've
The
started to
villager
think of
jockey.
yeah, I'm starting to think of other things you could possibly do with that. And I just saw a video today from I don't. You're probably familiar with is that Phoenix SC?
Yes, with the
Um,
leads going from fence to fence.
yeah, leads from fence to fence, and then also there's a the community is wanting ways to link mine carts. Um, I
My
don't know.
personal take on the minecart is it doesn't need to be rope because I think rope would snap. And I think that chains have long not had enough utilization.
Hmm.
Mm,
Agree.
In my
yeah,
personal opinion, if you're hooking minecarts together, you should definitely use chains to hook them together. But yeah, it's been. I actually have a number of hacks for making it look like rope is connected from fence to fence in games. You can do things like add cauldrons, or not cauldrons, excuse me, composters. You
yeah,
put a bird inside a composter, you put a trapdoor over the top of it, you add that every, 6 blocks or something along
right.
your fence line, and you can mimic the idea of rope, but yeah, I definitely think that that's something that Mojang, if they wanted to make the community very, very happy, would look into adding.
Yeah, and the other thing is I saw the sled and dog, and I thought, couldn't you do like an Iditarod race? Have a mine cart connected to the lead dog, which pulls the other dogs, and you're pulling a boat which you could ride on. I'm wondering if that would work. I even thought of jumping into a creative world and seeing if because I saw your dog and sled, but it was stationary. I was like, why couldn't we have that like in like cross country Iditarod race with dogs and a boat instead?
Yeah, it was something that the light bulb didn't go on until after I finished that video because I was literally editing and uploading it. I had already like finished it and was like pushing it out there
Yeah,
when the light bulb came on and I was like, "Oh my gosh, wait a minute. We could actually have dog sledding." And it
yeah,
totally is a
yeah.
thing is that you do have to do the finicky you have to put pigs with saddles in the boat. Because if you ride in the
Right,
boat,
right.
it's going to break stuff. But if you ride on a pig on a saddle in a boat, that's being pulled by a dog that's being pulled by a dog that's being pulled by a dog that's being pulled by an under the ground minecart, or pig in an underground minecart. Yes, you
Yeah.
absolutely can do that. It's slow. It's not super effective. It's not a great fast travel tool. And the biggest challenge is that your boats can't go up or down blocks. They can't even go up or down like
Oh,
snow,
true.
single snow layers, which is just completely ridiculous. Come on, Moshe, let a boat go up a single pixel. Um,
I know, right?
but but I was
Yeah,
actually
well,
thinking about it would be a fun track to have between different bases if you were in an ice world down ice rivers. Is you basically set up an ice
yeah.
river in which your boat's just sliding along the ice and the dogs are pulling you along. And I was considering making a video. I don't know that I will just because I have other things that are more on my plate right now. But you also can, I'll give this to you guys, and maybe you can do something fun with this. If you ride a horse with a saddle, the lead that's pulling the horse will break because your player control over that horse will take over and the minecart will not be able to pull the horse. But if you ride a horse without a saddle, so you tame the horse, you get on it, you take the saddle, you don't put a saddle on it, but you then lead that horse, you can then ride the horse as the horse is being pulled along, and the horse will go up and down blocks. And so I was actually planning on in 2 different parts of my world once this snapshot goes live, setting up a system where a horse is basically at a stable. You jump on the horse without a saddle, you press a button that sends an underground minecart along the road, and then you can just AFK ride the horse from one part of your world to the other part of the world. And when you arrive at the stable of the other, village or whatever the location is. And so it's not quite fast travel because it's the speed of a minecart going underneath the ground, but that's not nothing. And you can, walk
Yeah.
away, go get a drink, hand off the keyboard, do whatever it is you want to do, mess around in your inventory or something because the horse is pulling you along. And I don't think that's something that most people have realized that you can actually do.
Yeah, I think I saw something like that where they had made a merry-go-round. I instantly thought of one of our Realms members, Mika. He's done a merry-go-round before in our gaming area, and it tends to break. So I thought, well, this would be a cool little merry-go-round, to have horses on leads, with the hidden mine carts running above them.
It's funny. Someone, and we won't mention who, someone said to me when we were discussing about topics, what we could talk about before we decided to put this one on the agenda. It's like, oh, there's not much that we can talk about leads. Like, I don't think there's enough for an episode there. But we won't mention who that might have been. But it's just interesting when you start peeling back the layers and you start thinking about this Buildstone movement and what's coming in the new updates. It's sort of an exciting time because this is something new. People are looking at things differently. They're embracing it. They're getting different ideas. Just then listening to what you're talking about there, the AFK travel on a horse. My mind started thinking about something for my next Worlds for Interrealms plan. It's like, interesting. So it's just I think something with this is people, and I think we sort of touched on it before, people will see the prototype and just start building on it, and it's going to get bigger and bigger. And it's picking up some serious momentum.
Yeah, and I think that's probably my favorite part about the movement and just my part in it is that I want to be an enabler for inspiration. I don't want to be the guy who just shows up and gives people the answer. I want to be the guy who shows up and gives people the spark of inspiration that says, wait, what more can be done with this? For example, if you haven't seen the birds video, it's a really fun video. And I only showcased one design, but somebody got so inspired, they actually came into the Discord and started building bird after bird after bird. I think they've got 20 different types of birds now designed out in all sorts of different blocks and colors and everything, because they were like, I want to see how many birds I can make with this. And they got really, excited about that. And so I love the community aspect. And this is where I give a huge credit to the other creators in the space that absolutely could have just taken this idea, said nothing about the movement as a whole, and just showcased, check out my awesome waterfall. Or we mentioned Mumbo earlier, who could have just been like, hey, so I was thinking about fans and I decided to make a fan, right? You could have done that, absolutely could have done that. But instead, there has been this continuous calling out to the other creators and the other people who have inspired the different people that said, hey, so-and-so was inspired by so-and-so who was inspired by so-and-so, and I was inspired by that, so I'm going to take it and do this thing with it. And that shows how cooperative the community of Minecraft is. And I think if you look at the general gaming space, that is something incredibly unique to Minecraft and something incredibly special, is that people say, hey, no, I want to give credit where credit is due. And then I want to add my own piece to the puzzle. I want to see where's my special sauce that I can add to this incredible buffet of delicious builds.
You got away with words. I love that. The buffet of builds.
I was literally just laughing at my own. I was like, where did that even come from? What on earth? Okay, I guess I'm hungry. I need to go eat dinner. Hang on.
I've got today's episode title now, The Buffet of Builds. That's great.
That's great.
Yeah. But look, Jake, we do want to thank you for coming on. Our time is almost up for today. But if people want to learn more about you or the Buildstone movement, where will they go? Where should they go?
Well, they're certainly welcome to check out my channel, Jake Kelton Crafts. There's a bunch of really cool builds that we haven't even mentioned, a bunch of animated stuff that's on there. I'm a big lore buff. I love adding lore to my world, so there's a number of different videos about that. Oh, you mentioned moving boats. I actually have a Buildstone animated boat with a fisherman, so you should check that out because it's a really cool build as well. But really, genuinely, you probably want to join the Discord, which I can give you a link to add to the video. And that way, because the community in there is doing things that I had never even thought possible myself. And every day something new is popping in. We're about to start weekly inspiration where every Monday we'll drop an idea and say, hey, let's work together to figure out the best way to add cars that their headlights turn on at night and turn off during the day. And so for any car design that's in a city, you can actually have the cars look like their headlights are coming on at night and add some ambiance to your world in that regard and set different timings and stuff to it. Just, and we have new ideas that are coming up every single week. And so it'll be a lot of fun.
And Miner, how about us? If people want to learn more or talk to us or maybe ask some questions on our Discord?
Well, of course, you can always find us on the Interrealms SMP Discord. That's where we're always chatting. Something's always going on there. And if you want to talk to us in private, you can do that. Just send us a private message through the email. That you can do that at minecraftlabpodcast@gmail.com. We're also over on the socials at Twitter X at MC_lab podcast and on Blue Sky at MC. This is the one I forget. MC Lab podcast. That's probably not right, but
If only you had a script for this.
if only I had a script. Yes. And as always, the Interims SMP.com website. And I have been screwing up where you can find the podcasts. It is podcast.interimssmp.com. Yeah, that's where you can find us. And Jake is awesome talking to you about Buildstone and how your community is just growing. That's one thing that we do on this podcast is we talk about the bigger content creators, the smaller content creators within the Minecraft sphere, what they're working on, what they're passionate about, and how to help each other as creators. Whether you're making content or you're just in a community building together.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor to chat with you guys. And I'm really grateful to both be here and happen to, just with luck and the grace of God, be the person who has kind of helped forge a new direction for Minecraft. And I really appreciate you guys wanting to chat with me. The time flew by way too fast. And I'd love to chat more in the future. So.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back as this movement continues to grow and take on new things. You know what would be a really interesting conversation, Miner? Ray and Jake.
Oh, yes.
That'd be
Because
interesting.
I actually just watched the Rayworks episode from you guys today, and yeah, I love Rayworks had the same idea where he's like, people just haven't been building these redstone farms, so I'll just start making tutorials and just start making farms for different things. And then for me, I'm like, well, people just haven't been doing these animated things, so I guess I'll start doing tutorials on these animated stuff and show people how to do animated things.
Awesome. We'd love to have you back, and maybe if that was something you're interested in, if we could have a chat to Ray, maybe it's something we can tee up. And if our listeners want to hear maybe that conversation, which I have a feeling would be a conversation where you go, Jake meet Ray, Ray meet Jake, and Miner and I just sit back and shut up for the rest of the episode, I think it would be great.
Well, I guess it's up to the listeners to decide if that's something that happens or not.
Yeah, let us know, folks. Let us know. But no, Jake, we know you have to head off. You're on a bit of a tight schedule today, so thank you for making time for us. And look forward to talking some more soon.
Thank you for having me. It's been a ton of fun.
This has been a production of the Interims Podcast Network. For more information, go to podcast.interimssmp.com. You can see that full link in the description of this episode. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Jake.
Now, if you could edit it to make me sound like way smarter than I actually am, that'd be great.